Imagine standing at the absolute highest point on planet Earth.
Right.
You are 29,028 feet in the air. The oxygen is so staggeringly thin that your brain is, well, it's barely functioning.
Yeah, you're exhausted.
Exactly. The cold is beyond bone chilling, but you made it. You take a camera out to snap a photo of your climbing partner to document this, this monumental historic achievement.
Of course.
But then, when it's your turn to step in front of the lens, you completely refuse to have your own picture taken. I mean, who reaches the roof of the world, a place no human being has ever stood before, and just says, no thanks, I don't need a photo?
It's wild, right? But that seemingly bizarre decision reveals the core of a man who basically spent his entire life defying expectations.
Yeah.
In our modern era, if you don't have a picture of yourself conquering a milestone, it's almost as if it didn't happen.
Picture, it didn't happen, right?
Yeah, exactly. But when you look at the psychological makeup of the person we're examining today, the missing photograph isn't an oversight. It's a profound statement about what he valued.
And unpacking those values is our mission today. We are diving into a comprehensive biographical source document to explore the remarkably human story behind a global icon, Sir Edmund Hillary.
It's such a great story.
It really is. We're looking far beyond the famous summit of Mount Everest to find, a shy beekeeper, a rigorously scientific Yeti hunter.
Which is just incredible.
Right. An outspoken citizen who willingly waded into toxic politics, and a man who channeled unimaginable tragedy into a lifelong legacy. Okay, let's unpack this.
Stripping away the mythology is definitely the best place to start, because when you hear the name Edmund Hillary, the immediate image is this, rugged, fearless, larger-than-life explorer built for the ice.
Like a superhero.
Yeah, exactly. But the reality of his origins is entirely the opposite. To understand how someone manages to survive the death zone on Mount Everest, you first have to look at the mechanics of how they survived their youth.
Right, and he definitely wasn't born a rugged mountain man. He was born in Auckland, New Zealand in 1919, and he was a remarkably shy kid.
Very shy.
Physically smaller than his peers, too.
Yeah.
But here is the detail from the sources that really grounds him in reality for me. His mother wanted him to attend a quote-unquote good school, so he was enrolled at Auckland Grammar School. But the family lived in a place called Tuakau. Think about your own daily commute for a second. This young, socially anxious kid was commuting 1 hour and 40 minutes each way by train and bicycle.
Which is, that's 3.5 hours of transit every single day.
Every day.
For over 3 years.
Yeah.
That kind of grueling, repetitive isolation during formative teenage years, it forces a certain kind of introspection.
Yeah, and it meant he couldn't participate in after-school activities or socialize normally, and he didn't even excel academically either.
Right, he was pretty average.
He struggled with math and science and eventually dropped out of university entirely. So he ends up working as a beekeeper with his father and brother. Now, normally beekeeping sounds like this gentle pastoral hobby.
Yeah, you picture a guy in a white suit in a sunny field. But not this operation.
Not at all.
His father, Percy, had transitioned from journalism to commercial apiary work, and they were managing 1,600 hives.
1,600. Which is this is where the mechanisms of his physical endurance get built.
Oh, absolutely.
Operating 1,600 hives isn't an agricultural job. It's a relentless, unorthodox physical boot camp.
Yeah.
The sources detail how they were hauling around 90-pound boxes of honeycomb all day long. And on top of that, he was enduring anywhere from 12 to 100 bee stings in a single day.
100 stings.
I mean, if you try to intentionally design a training regimen to prepare someone for the sustained misery of high-altitude mountain climbing, you'd want them doing heavy-weighted carries while subjected to constant pain stimuli.
And the physiological adaptation there is fascinating, because he isn't just building physical muscle mass. Enduring that volume of repetitive physical labor and constant pain, it rewires the brain's stress response.
It creates a baseline for suffering.
Exactly, a profound baseline. 100 bee stings a day teaches the nervous system to compartmentalize discomfort. So he spent his summers working the bees and then used his winters to focus on his new passion for climbing, which he'd actually discovered at age 16 on a school trip to Mount Ruapehu.
But the physical tolerance is really only half the equation here. There's this fascinating detail about a life philosophy group his family joined called Radiant Living.
Oh, this part is so interesting. Founded by a man named Herbert Sutcliffe. Radiant living was this holistic philosophy that promoted tenets like pacifism and a diet heavily focused on salad.
Salads, yeah.
Right. But more critically, for Hillary's psychological development, it focused intensively on self-confidence and public speaking.
And he threw himself into it so completely that he became a teacher for the group.
He did.
He passed the exams with a 100% mark, and the title of his test lecture is incredibly revealing. It was called Inferiority, Cause, and Cure.
He was literally lecturing on how to dismantle his own greatest weakness.
Wow.
Yeah, he explicitly credited the Radiant Living movement with teaching him how to speak confidently, think freely, and engage with a wide variety of people. So by the time he reaches his early 20s, the beekeeping has given him an absolute tolerance for physical suffering, right? And Radiant Living has eradicated his paralyzing sense of inferiority. He has, entirely unknowingly, engineered the precise psychological and physical profile required for extreme exploration.
It's the perfect storm. But, a rural beekeeper from New Zealand with high pain tolerance can't just buy a ticket to Mount Everest in the 1950s.
No, definitely not.
He needs a vehicle to get there, and that vehicle ends up being a massive militarized geopolitical operation. First, World War II breaks out. Hillary serves in the Royal New Zealand Air Force as a navigator on Catalina flying boats, surviving severe burn injuries in the Solomon Islands. When the dust of the war finally settles, the race for the Himalayas suddenly kicks into high gear.
Yeah, the geopolitical window was just slamming shut at that point.
How so?
Well, the traditional, long-established climbing route to Everest had always been through Tibet. But in 1949, China closed Tibet's borders.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so the only alternative route was through Nepal, and the Nepalese government was highly restrictive, permitting only 1 or 2 foreign expeditions per year.
So you have a geographic bottleneck, but the sources also describe this intense nationalistic pressure.
Very much so.
The British Empire is financially exhausted post-war, watching its global influence actively wane. Everest isn't just a mountain to them. It's the ultimate final frontier. It's a symbolic victory they desperately need.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, the urgency was palpable because the Swiss almost took the prize just the year prior.
Right, in 1952.
Yes. In 1952, a Swiss expedition made a devastatingly close attempt from the Nepal side. They were turned back by brutal weather and failing oxygen equipment just 800 feet below the summit.
800 feet. That is heartbreaking.
It is, and the British organizers knew the stakes. If they failed in 1953, the French held the climbing permit for 1954, and the Swiss had secured it again for 1955. This was, in all likelihood, Britain's last clear shot at history.
Which sets the stage for the 1953 British expedition led by John Hunt. Now, when I picture a mountaineering expedition, my brain defaults to a handful of rugged people with backpacks and ice axes,
Like a small, scrappy team.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But the scale of this operation detailed in the sources is staggering. 400 people.
Incredible.
362 porters. 20 Sherpa guides. 10,000 pounds of baggage. I mean, with an operation this massive, literally thousands of pounds of gear and hundreds of people, was this a mountaineering climb or a military invasion?
It sounds like an invasion, honestly. It relies entirely on a concept called siege mountaineering, a strategy deeply rooted in John Hunt's military background.
Siege mountaineering.
Yeah, you don't just hike up Everest. A siege climb is a war of attrition against altitude. You establish a massive base camp at the bottom. Then, teams carry tons of gear up through dangerous terrain to establish Camp 1, drop the supplies, and descend.
Okay, so relay.
Exactly. Then, a slightly smaller team ferries gear to Camp 2. You are slowly and methodically building a logistical pyramid up the mountain, ensuring that when the final assault team makes their push, every ounce of food, oxygen, and shelter they need is already waiting for them.
And Hillary was essential to building that pyramid. He took on the terrifying task of forging the route through the Khumbu icefall.
The icefall is brutal.
For anyone unfamiliar, the icefall is this constantly shifting glacier, essentially made of building-sized blocks of ice called seracs that can collapse without a moment's notice.
It's terrifying.
The source is, quote, a cameraman on the expedition who described Hillary as a human machine. He noted that when Hillary said, let's give it a go, it wasn't a suggestion of effort. It meant he would absolutely fix whatever the obstacle was.
That is the beekeeper's mindset activating right there, hauling heavy loads through unpredictable pain. But the fascinating dynamic of a 400-person siege expedition is that the entire collective effort eventually funnels down to just 2 individuals.
Yeah. John Hunt selects 2 specialized teams for the final summit push. The first team is Tom Bourdion and Charles Evans. They make their attempt on May 26th. but they are forced to turn back just 300 vertical feet from the top because Evans's oxygen system fails. I have to ask, was this a user error on Evans's part, or was the 1950s technology simply that unreliable?
It was a huge technological gamble. They were using experimental closed-circuit oxygen systems, which were designed to recirculate the climber's exhaled breath, scrub out the carbon dioxide, and add pure oxygen.
Sounds advanced for the time.
In theory, it's highly efficient. In practice, the valves were incredibly prone to freezing in the extreme temperatures. Evans's system iced up, essentially suffocating him. At 28,000 feet, an equipment failure isn't an inconvenience. It's an immediate death sentence if you don't descend.
Which opens the door for the second team. Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay, May 28, 1953. They pitch a tiny tent at 27,900 feet.
Just the two of them.
Their support team heads back down. It's just them freezing, waiting for the sun.
Right.
To understand what they're going through, we have to look at the physiology of the death zone.
Right.
Above 26,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure is so low your body literally cannot acclimatize. Your cells are slowly dying. You cannot digest food. Sleep is nearly impossible. So when Hillary wakes up on the morning of May 29th, his body is actively deteriorating, and he wakes up to a massive problem.
He had left his boots outside the tent, and they had frozen completely solid.
Thousands of feet into the death zone, with the summit agonizingly close, and his boots are essentially blocks of ice.
It's unimaginable.
The sources note he spends 2 agonizing hours holding them over a small camp stove just to thaw them enough to force his feet inside. If you're wondering why they didn't just wait for the sun to warm them up, remember the biological clock.
Every minute counts.
Every minute spent at that altitude is draining their life force. They are wearing 30-pound packs relying on bottled oxygen, and they finally step out into the cold.
They push upward and encounter the final, infamous obstacle, a sheer 40-foot vertical rock face, which today is known as the Hillary Step.
He finds a crack wedged between the rock and the snow. He jams himself inside, wriggling and forcing his way up the chimney, hacking steps into the ice with his axe, desperately wondering where the top could possibly be. And then the ridge simply drops away.
At 11:30 in the morning on May 29, 1953, Edmund Hillary and Tenzing Norgay become the first human beings to stand at the summit of Mount Everest.
They only spent about 15 minutes up there.
That's it.
Which brings us back to that missing photograph. Hillary documents Tenzing holding his ice axe, but he completely declines to have his own photo taken.
It's just so humble.
The ego suppression required to endure a lifetime of suffering to reach the pinnacle of human exploration and then decide you don't need the selfie to prove it is staggering.
It really highlights a hyper-rational focus. Hillary knew that reaching the top was only the halfway point. Most mountaineering fatalities happen on the descent when adrenaline fades and exhaustion takes over.
Right, you still have to get down.
Exactly. They stayed just long enough to observe their respective rituals. Tenzing left chocolates in the snow as a Buddhist offering, and Hillary buried a small cross given to him by John Hunt.
My favorite moment is the descent. They're coming down the mountain, completely exhausted, and the first person they run into is their friend George Lowe.
Oh, this is classic.
Hillary looks at him and, in the most profoundly understated, classic New Zealand way, delivers the legendary line, "Well, George, we knocked the bastard off."
It perfectly encapsulates his grounded nature, and we really must emphasize the absolute symbiosis of this partnership. You have two men from vastly different worlds, a rural New Zealand beekeeper and a Sherpa who grew up in the shadow of the Himalayas.
Worlds apart.
Completely. Hillary had noted earlier that Tenzing possessed substantially greater personal ambition than any Sherpa he had met. At that extreme altitude, survival is entirely dependent on trusting the unique strengths of your partner. Neither of them could have conquered those final 300 vertical feet alone.
News of the triumph reaches Britain on the very morning of Queen Elizabeth II's coronation. It's hailed as a symbolic coronation gift, and Hillary is immediately knighted. Wow. But looking at the timeline and the sources, a stark question emerges. He summits Everest at just 33 years old.
Right.
What on earth do you possibly do with the remaining decades of your life when you've literally peaked in your early 30s?
I mean, most individuals in that position monetize the thing. You write the memoirs, you do the international lecture circuit, and you comfortably retire into your status. But the radiant living philosophy and the apiary work ethic had permanently wired his brain for action. He simply didn't possess the architecture to stop.
He climbs 10 other Himalayan peaks over the next decade. When he runs out of mountains, he turns to the ends of the earth.
Of course he does.
In 1958, He leads the New Zealand section of the Commonwealth Transantarctic Expedition, becoming the first person to reach the South Pole overland, using motor vehicles since 1912. Years later, he flies to the North Pole alongside astronaut Neil Armstrong,
landing him the entirely unique distinction of being the first human to stand at both poles and the summit of Everest.
But the most revealing post-Everest endeavor is the 1960 Silver Hut expedition. They spent 6 months living at 20,000 feet to study high-altitude acclimatization.
Which is grueling.
But they were also officially hunting for the Yeti, the fabled abominable snowman.
Wait, really? The Yeti?
Yes, which perfectly demonstrates his scientific rigor. He didn't mock the local legends, but he also didn't accept them on blind faith. He applied an empirical approach. He traveled to remote monasteries that claimed to hold Yeti relics. He gathered evidence.
And what did he find?
He proved that the fabled Yeti scalps were actually constructed from the hides of bears and a goat antelope. He demanded evidence and found rational explanations.
That's amazing.
But that deep engagement with the world leads to a detail in the sources that I have to challenge.
Okay, what stands out to you?
Sir Edmund Hillary is a universally beloved national hero. He's practically a monument. Yet he actively dives into incredibly toxic, polarizing political issues back home. He openly campaigned for the Labour Party in 1975, which the sources note cost him a nomination to be the Governor-General of New Zealand. Even more shockingly, he served as a vice president for the Abortion Law Reform Association, pushing to repeal restrictive contraception laws. Regardless of anyone's personal stance on those issues, it's incredibly surprising that a universally beloved national hero would risk his popularity to dive into such fiercely debated, controversial political waters. Why not just smile, wave, and protect your brand?
Well, what's fascinating here is, if we view this purely analytically, setting aside the specifics of the political debates themselves, it reveals everything about his interpretation of duty. He vehemently refused to be a passive monument.
Interesting.
Many public figures reach a critical mass of fame where their sole objective becomes protecting that fame. But his early philosophical training taught him that social capital is worthless if you don't spend it.
Right.
By stepping into those contentious arenas, he demonstrated a willingness to engage in the messy, complicated reality of society. He didn't want to hover safely above it. He felt a civic obligation to apply his influence, even if it cost him prestigious titles.
He viewed political engagement as just another formidable mountain he was obligated to climb. But his life trajectory wasn't an unbroken string of adventurous triumphs.
No, it wasn't.
The very region of the world that cemented his legacy also delivered an unimaginable heartbreak.
This is the definitive turning point of his later years.
In 1975, Hillary was in the remote Nepalese village of Phaflu. He wasn't there attempting a new summit. He was there helping to construct a local hospital.
Right.
His wife, Louise, and his 16-year-old daughter, Belinda, were flying out to join him. Tragically, shortly after taking off from Kathmandu, their small plane crashed. Both Louise and Belinda were killed.
The psychological devastation of that moment is just hard to articulate. Many people faced with that level of sudden, incomprehensible grief would have severed all ties with the region.
Absolutely.
They would have associated the Himalayas entirely with their trauma and never returned.
I kept wondering how a person navigates that kind of grief. How do you move forward when the place you love takes away the people you love? So what does this all mean?
Well, you channel the grief into service. In 1960, Hillary had established the Himalayan Trust. After the plane crash, rather than abandoning the Sherpa people, he poured the entirety of his focus into the organization.
Wow.
And crucially, he wasn't just a figurehead signing checks from a comfortable office in Auckland. He was physically on the ground, wielding hammers and organizing logistics.
Still doing the hard work.
Exactly. Through the trust, he drove the construction of dozens of schools, hospitals, bridges, and airstrips across this incredibly remote, underserved region.
And that is where his ultimate legacy crystallizes. If you go to Nepal today, he isn't revered merely as the first foreigner to conquer their sacred mountain.
He is revered as their most devoted, lifelong friend. He understood that the Sherpa people had carried him to his greatest triumph, and he spent the rest of his life carrying them.
That's beautiful.
In 2003, for the 50th anniversary of the climb, the Nepalese government conferred honorary citizenship upon him, the first foreign national ever to receive it. When he passed away in 2008, the crucial airstrip in Lukla was renamed the Tenzing Hillary Airport. If we evaluate the totality of his existence, his truest monuments aren't the physical peaks he climbed, but the educational and medical infrastructure he left behind.
It completely reframes his historical footprint. And there's one final brilliant detail from the sources regarding his humility that perfectly bookends his story.
Oh, I loved this part.
In 1992, New Zealand updated their $5 banknote and decided to feature Sir Edmund Hillary's face on it. This made him the only living person, aside from the head of state, to ever appear on their currency.
A singular monumental honor.
But Hillary agreed to it with one very specific condition. He insisted that the background of the note feature Aoraki, the indigenous name for Mount Cook. He explicitly did not want Mount Everest on the bill.
Refusing the global triumph for the local connection?
He didn't want the international fame to define him. He wanted the backdrop to be his personal favorite mountain in New Zealand, the peak where he learned his craft back in 1939.
Right.
And despite traveling the globe, standing at both poles, and surviving the death zone, he maintained that his favorite place on Earth was just a humble, quiet cabin, a traditional New Zealand back on the rugged west coast of Auckland.
It proves that the knighthood, the international acclaim, the unprecedented exploration, none of it fundamentally altered his core identity. He remained the boy on the train, the beekeeper, who understood that the only way forward is to put your head down and do the hard work.
Which leaves us with this final thought to mull over. We live in a society that constantly commands us to conquer things. We're told to conquer our career paths, conquer our personal goals, conquer nature itself, and then make absolutely certain we broadcast a photo of ourselves doing it.
Right, the social media era.
Exactly. But looking at the full arc of Sir Edmund Hillary's life, maybe the true measure of a person isn't the flag they plant at the summit for their own glory. Maybe the true measure is the foundation they build at the bottom of the mountain for everyone else. Keep wondering, keep exploring. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.